Hi YouTube, Tim Unkert here. In this video, we're going to look at powers of I. So I is the square root of -1. Let's write that down. And that is an imaginary number. So that's what we use to represent an imaginary number. And interestingly, imaginary numbers are used in electrical engineering, physics, science, and those kind of things. So they actually do have real world applications, even though they're imaginary. And one of the important things that you need to learn is the powers of I, because sometimes if you uh, run the powers of I, you get a real number. So let's go through it. Let's look at this first one. We have I squared here. Well, what is I squared? Well, that's equal to I times I. And what is I? Well, I is, again, the square root of -1. So it's the square root of -1 times the square root of -1, which is the same as the square root of -1 squared. So when you square a square root, you just take away the square root, and this is equal to just plain old -1. So we have an imaginary number squared is equal to a real number. Kind of interesting there. All right, let's look at I cubed. So what is I cubed equal to? Well, that's equal to I times I times I. We already know that I times I is equal to -1. So we have -1 times I. So -1 times I is -I. So I cubed equals -I. Okay, let's keep going and look at a few others. Let's go down here a little bit. All right, so we want to know what I to the fourth power is. Well, I to the fourth power is I times I times I times I. Interesting. So I times I, we know this is I squared. This is -1. And we have another I times I, so that's -1. So we have -1 times -1. A negative times a negative is a positive. So we just get +1. I to the fourth equals +1. That's a real number also. Okay, so right now let's go to problem 4. We're going to go to I to the fifth power. And you might want to take a moment, pause the video, see if you can figure this out, what this is before I answer it, and then also smash the like button. Okay, so let's see, what is I to the fifth? Well, I to the fifth is I times I times I times I times I. Well, we have an I to the fourth here, right? I to the fourth is just 1. So we have 1 times I. So I to the fifth is just I. Okay? So if we cycled back, and you notice there's a cycle, you go through I squared, I cubed, I to the fourth, and you go back to I to the fifth, and you begin this cycle again. So let's just show what each of these is. So I is equal to I, obviously. I squared is equal to -1. I cubed is equal to -I. I to the fourth is equal to 1. And then we go back and we start with the cycle I to the fifth. Well, that's going to be I again. And then if you do I to the sixth, well, I to the sixth is I to the fifth times -1. So that's negative. Uh, yeah, sorry. It's I times I, so it's -1. Had a brain meltdown there. I need some coffee. Okay. I to the seventh. We have -1 times I, so it's -I. And I to the eighth, well, that's negative I times I. That gives you back to 1 here. So we have this cycle that we go through for each 4 values of I. So we're going to use that as we progress in our problem. So let's keep going. So, okay, so problem 5. Well, again, we said I to the 5th. If we go through our cycle, I to the 5th is I. I to the 6th is negative 1. I to the 7th is negative I. And I to the 8th is going to be equal to 1. If we go back up, remember we have this cycle here that we go through. Okay, so I to the 8th is just 1. Okay, so we don't want to keep writing this stuff out, so we want to think about this. Well, I to the 14th. Well, when does a cycle begin? Well, it begins at the number right after, so it begins at I to the 5th, which is right after the power 4. It begins at I to the 9th, which is right after the power 8, and it'll begin at I to the 13th, which is right after I to the 12th. So I to the 13th is going to be equal to I, and we'll go I to the 14th is going to be equal to negative 1. So that equals negative 1. Let me make a, this one's not a great negative here. Okay, so we got to remember that cycle. It's by multiples of 4, right? Is when the cycle ends. And the cycle starts right after that multiple of 4. So let's keep going. All right, so problem 7, we have I to the 45th power. Well, what's a multiple of 4? Well, I to the 44th power is a multiple of 4. Remember, that's got to be just 1. And then I to the 45th power starts the cycle again. So that starts the cycle again. I to the 45th power is just I. So this is equal to I. Let's look at this one. I to the 79th power. So we want to think. Let's see, 78 divisible by 4. Let's take a check. So 4 goes into 1, or into 7 once. We have a 4 here, and we have a 3 here, but we have an 8 here. So 4 doesn't go into 38. So no, that's I to the 78th isn't where it starts. But what about 76? Let's try 76. So 4 goes into 7 once. We subtract 4. We get a 3 here. Bring down the 6. 36. 4 goes into 36 exactly 19 times. So the cycle ends at I to the 76. And and then it's going to begin at I to the 77th. So I to the 77th is going to be equal to I. I to the 78th is going to be equal to negative 1. And then I to the 79th power is going to equal negative I. So this is equal to negative I. So you got to think multiples of 4. You look at the power. Is it a multiple of 4? If it is, that's the end of the cycle where it's equal to 1. If it's right after that, it's the start of the cycle where it's equal to I, and you just have to go off of that. So if it's 2 after, you go I, then negative 1. If it's 3 after, you go I, negative 1, negative I. And if it's right there as a multiple of 4, it's just 1. Okay, so it will follow that pattern. And let me bring you back up to the pattern here. Pattern right here. So it's going to follow this pattern for every, it goes I to the first, I to the second, I to the third, I to the fourth, the pattern ends. Then we start again. I to the fifth, I to the sixth, I to the seventh, I to the eighth. 8 is a multiple of 4. It ends. Then we go I to the ninth, I to the 10th, I to the 11th, I to the 12th. It ends again. Okay, so just keep that in mind when you're evaluating powers of I. Hopefully this video was helpful to you. If it was, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.